What impact will the newcomers at safety have for the Panthers this season? We'll talk about that right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you, starting back again on Monday, every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, Friday, your team every day. That is our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, because starting on July 26th, next 2 Fridays from now, I will be answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions either at me or DM me to get those questions to me for the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Today, we conclude our breakdown of the defensive side of the ball here in Carolina. We've talked about the edge rushers. We talked about defensive line, inside linebackers, talked about corners. And on today's show, we're going to talk about the safety room here in Carolina. And when putting my notes together, I was thinking to myself, is this not like the most incognito, under-discussed, undervalued, under-insert whatever on the team here in Carolina heading to 2024? Doing the mailbag, I can't recall a single time throughout the offseason where anyone asked me about the safety position. It's possible someone asked, but I do not recall anyone ever asking, hey, Julian, what are the Panthers going to do at safety? Vonn Bell's not here anymore. Who are they going to bring in to help out and be a starter opposite Xavier Woods? Never asked any thoughts about Xavier Woods as a whole. So I'm sitting here and I'm putting my notes together and I'm wondering, what exactly are you going to say? Because it's not like you, Julian, me speaking in third person, ever talk that much about the safety room here in Carolina, even though they've been relatively solid over the last couple of seasons with Xavier Woods back there and having Vonn Bell last year. And now they're bringing in 2 new players this offseason to come in, one to start and one to potentially be an experienced backup this season. So talking about the biggest story, about the biggest name, I don't really feel like there's a big name at all with the safety group. So let's discuss the 2 newcomers here and what impact they may have this upcoming season in Carolina. Starting off with Jordan Fuller, who comes over from the Los Angeles Rams, where he spent the first 4 years of his career, where, of course, he has ties to the defensive coordinator here in Carolina, Ejiro Evero, having played for him there in Los Angeles. And now he'll play for him here in Carolina. He only signed a 1-year, $3.25 million contract. So a prove-it contract. If he plays well, the Panthers can bring him back next season. If he doesn't play well, then Carolina's going to have a lot of decisions to make about the safety room, as Xavier Woods is also having an expiring contract this year. Nick Scott, we're going to talk about momentarily. He only has a 1-year deal. Some major questions about the long-term safety prognosis here on the roster in Carolina. But last year, Fuller started all 17 games and played in the playoff game against the Lions for the Los Angeles Rams. He had 3 interceptions. That was tied for the Rams team lead last season. Fuller finished the season as one of 11 players in the NFL who forced 6 or more turnovers. He had 3 forced fumbles to go along with those 3 interceptions. Fuller originally was a 6th-round pick out of the Ohio State University back in 2020, has played in 48 regular season games, starting 46, and he quickly earned a starting spot as a rookie, but dealt with injuries in 2021 and more so in 2022. And 4 full NFL seasons, Fuller has 7 interceptions, 4 forced fumbles, 17 pass defended, and 279 total tackles. 3 of those 7 interceptions coming last year, and 3 of those 4 forced fumbles coming last season with the Rams. Looking at his PFF grades last season in LA, overall grade a 66.7. That was 48 out of 95 qualifying safeties. Coverage grade a 63.3. That was 52nd out of 94 qualifying safeties. And his run defense grade, pretty solid, 75.0. That was 20th out of 92 qualifying safeties, according to Pro Football Focus. Also, looking at his passer rating allowed at PFF, Pro Football Reference also, they have their own passer rating stats. They don't always match, but he allowed a 73.8 passer rating last year, which is pretty good. And this is one thing I'm really interested to see what role he's going to play here this season in Carolina. He's obviously going to be a starter, started all his games last year, has been a starter for the most part during his time in the NFL since leaving Ohio State, playing for what has been a good franchise in LA. I know they had the one down year in 2022. Then they bounced right back last season, getting back to the playoffs and pushing the Lions and Matthew Stafford's return there to Detroit. So he played for a really good defense, and he was a solid player for them. I'm interested to see what role he's going to play. Looking at last year, Vonn Bell and Xavier Woods, they kind of split roles as far as who's going to play free safety, who's going to play closer up to the line of scrimmage in the box. Looking at last year in LA, Fuller was primarily a free safety, playing 692 snaps at free safety and in 226 in the box. Will that be the case again this year? Will he play primarily at free, or will he step up and play in the box, where he showed last year he was one of the best safeties in the league against the run? Xavier Woods, we'll talk about later, he's also been pretty good against the run in his career and was really good last year overall here in Carolina. So Jordan Fuller, expect him to come in and to be a starter. The other guy the Panthers brought in as far as safety depth goes is Nick Scott, who signed a 1-year, $1.292 million contract. And it was pretty rough for him last year in Cincinnati. He spent last year there, he had spent the first couple seasons of his career up in or down over in LA with the Rams, of course, with Ejiro Evero, playing with Jordan Fuller, having some familiarity with the scheme that's obviously going to be played here in Carolina. Originally a 7th-round pick out of Penn State. He started 27 games and 81 appearances and has 4 total interceptions. And he started the first 10 games last year in Cincinnati before being benched in the final 7 games, where he was primarily just a special teams guy. And looking at his PFF grades, oh boy, it was rough. He was the worst safety in the NFL, according to PFF. Overall grade, a 44.0, which was the worst. Coverage grade, 38.8, the worst. Run defense grade, 53.6. That was 83rd out of 92 qualifying safeties. The one area where Nick Scott was not the complete worst starting safety in the NFL, or just safety who played a lot of snaps last year in the league. So the Panthers have signed the worst safety from last year to be, I would think, heading into training camp, their primary backup. Now, you can look at that and you can scratch your head and wonder, why the hell are you signing this guy? But then you look at it, it's a 1-year deal. It's not like he's getting paid a ton of money, and the expectation is not for him to start. Now, if he has to start, that's not the best thing in the world, but it also may not be the worst, considering he's played in the defense. It's not like there's going to be much of a learning curve, and maybe last year was just a down year for Nick Scott. But then again, looking at how his career has gone so far, he's never really been the key guy. There's actually a game back when the Rams won the Super Bowl against Tampa in that great game against Tom Brady where they won that game. Nick Scott had to fill in for Jordan Fuller, who was injured, and actually picked off Tom Brady. So he's shown that in big moments, he can make a big play. Last year in Cincy, where they were losing both their top safeties, and Vonn Bell, who came here to Carolina, then Jesse Bates, who went down to the division rival Atlanta Falcons. Yeah, they got bad safety play, and I don't really know what the Bengals did this offseason, but I don't think they're missing Nick Scott. The Panthers will bring him on. He knows the scheme. He's a veteran, played before, and there is value in that. The hope is, though, he's not having to play very much this upcoming season. So the expectation, Jordan Fuller is going to come in, should be a solid starter for the Panthers, was a middle-tier safety last year, and hope is entering into his second contract, getting an opportunity to be a starter again, playing on really a prove-it deal, the chance to get paid some good money moving forward after the season. He's a guy who could be really good for them, paired up with Xavier Woods, and then break glass in case of emergency. Nick Scott and some of the other guys we'll talk about momentarily as we look at the rest of the safety depth chart can come in and help out this team. So let's see, what else do they have here at safety? And is Xavier Woods now one of the top defensive leaders here in Carolina, considering all the players that have left this offseason? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. All the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, excluding supply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. We just talked about the two newcomers here to Carolina at the safety position in Jordan Fuller and Nick Scott. Let's take a look at the rest of the safety depth chart here in Carolina heading into training camp in just a week and a half away. July 12th, 19th, next Friday. All the rookies are going to report. Then on the 23rd, the vets report. 24th, going to start practice. So 12 days away from the start of training camp here in Uptown Charlotte, right off of Cedar Street. So excited to see all that. And of course, going to have Fan Fest down there at Clemson, which is good to still have the upstate involved. Disappointing that's not still down there at Wofford. That was a really cool thing the Panthers were doing for all those years, but David Tepper decided, no, let's not do that anymore. All right, Xavier Woods coming back for the final year of his 3-year deal that he signed after leaving Minnesota a couple seasons ago to come to Carolina to be a starting safety. And he's been a really solid player for the Panthers. He has played and started in 29 games past 2 seasons. Last year, missed 3 games while dealing with a hamstring. He and Vonn Bell were both out for a period of time, which was a common theme for the Panthers last year defensively, as they had a lot of starters that were out a period of time, maybe even longer than that last season due to injury. But when he played, Woods was damn good, y'all. And honestly, again, we're talking about this being the most incognito, under-discussed, undervalued position group in Carolina. When he played last year, he was really good. And looking at his PFF numbers, which is just one piece of the puzzle, his overall grade was an 80.3. That was 12th among 95 qualifying safeties, the highest of his career. Coverage grade was an 81.7. That was 10th out of 94 safeties. Run defense grade, solid 73.7, 25th out of 92 safeties, right up there with Jordan Fuller. Xavier Woods was, by all accounts, a top 10, top 12 safety in the NFL last season, playing year when he was also banged up for a team that was the worst team in the league. And this just goes to show you that while the Panthers as a team weren't great, there are still players that had pretty damn good season. We talked about Derek Brown on the podcast, how well he played last season. We talked about Adam Thielen. There's plenty of individuals that had good years, and Xavier Woods is one of the individuals who also had a good year last season. And the hope is coming this season, he can have a really good year and potentially sign a new deal here in Carolina. I think that's something to monitor too. Is there an appetite for Woods to sign an extension? Last offseason, they restructured his contract, which is something that Samir Suleiman and Scott Fitter love to do, to mess up the salary cap. They didn't do that this year. Let him play it out. Maybe they decide at some point in the middle of the season, let's give this guy a new deal. Let's keep him around. We will see. But when you consider that Jeremy Chin's no longer here, Vonn Bell leaves after 1 season, Frankie Louvu's gone, Yetur Gross-Matos, you want to count him. A lot of these, Dante Jackson, of course, a lot of defensive leaders and stalwarts over the last couple of seasons no longer here. Woods is now a veteran here in Carolina, heading into his 3rd season as a starter. Does he take on more of a leadership role with him and DB coming back? Of course, Shaq Thompson heading to year 10. I'm sure that Jadeveon Clowney is going to have some sort of leadership role as he makes his homecoming back here to Carolina. I'm curious to see how that plays out. And I'm also curious to see, like I talked about earlier, Jordan Fuller, where does he line up? Does he line up more at free or in the box? We will see, but the Panthers have a good player in Xavier Woods, and we should certainly appreciate him more than maybe we have. I don't know if you're underappreciating him or if you do appreciate him. I don't know, but let's maybe talk more about Xavier Woods, and I'll try to take my own advice moving into the season. Sam Franklin Jr., one of Matt Rule's day ones, is back for a 5th season. You can complain, and rightfully so, about all the things that went wrong under Rule and under Frank Reich last season. But Sam Franklin has been one of the positives to come out of that Matt Rule era, like a Frankie Louvu was, unfortunately, weren't able to keep him around. But Sam Franklin Jr. has played in 64 games past 4 seasons. He has played 778 snaps on defense, 1,086 snaps on special teams. He has been a core special teamer, and I would think that this is a guy that would be up for a special teams captain if the Panthers want to have one this season. Not sure how Dave Canales is going to go about naming captains, where he's going to name, where the team's going to vote on him, and if they're going to have special teams or not. But Sam Franklin is a guy that you would think would be right there up front to be one of those leaders in that unit. Got an opportunity to play more safety last year because of the injuries to Vonn Bell and Xavier Woods. Mixed results. He did have a career 30 tackles last season, had the most special teams tackles, which has been really what's expected out of him in his first 4 years in Carolina. I'm expecting him once again to be a special teams ace and maybe another opportunity to be a backup safety and get some snaps out there if they need him to do that. The other two guys I'm looking at who will also potentially get an opportunity to play a role on special teams and maybe as quality backups for Carolina this year at safety, or Jamie Robinson, the 5th-round pick in a 2023 draft out of Florida State, former South Carolina Gamecock, as well as first-team All-ACC for his 2 years. Then last season, quite honestly, I forgot he was on the roster at times. Played in 15 games, apparently started 2. That's what Pro Football Reference says. I don't recall when those games were. I guess I could have looked it up because they do put an asterisk to let you know which games those were. But he only played 64 snaps on defense. So if he started, it just was he was out there in that alignment. And it's not like he actually was really starting. When you play 64 snaps, that's not a lot considering the guy we're about to talk to momentarily. He played that many snaps in his 2 starts that he made last season, 269 snaps also on special teams for Jamie Robinson. And when you think about the addition of a guy like Cha Smith-Wade, who we talked about on yesterday's show, who can play outside safety, inside at the slot, can move back, and outside corner, inside the slot corner, and then can move back and play safety. Does that take away from Jamie Robinson, who last year, looking at what he did in college, he played pretty much the same kind of roles, more so in a nickel and then at safety, not really outside, but they have a more versatile player who's good against the run in Cha Smith-Wade. Where does Jamie Robinson fit in all this? And he's going to be a guy who's going to be a back to the roster player who's going to need to make the team based off of special teams, especially when you think of Woods coming back to be a starter, Fuller coming in to be a starter. We'll see with Nick Scott, but Sam Franklin thinking he's going to probably be on the roster as good as he's been special teams wise his first 4 seasons. Where does Jamie Robinson factor into all of this? That is something to look at moving forward. And Alex Cook, the final player who I think could play a role here in the safety room this season, signed from the Giants practice squad on October 17th. Last season, he played in 10 games, starting 2 versus the Colts and the Bucks. And looking at his PFF grade from those games, he had a 66.0 versus Indianapolis and a 57.1 versus Tampa. Played 44% of special team snaps once he was signed to the roster. And I would think that special teams, again, going to be where he's going to start off. But look at Ejiro Evero. When Bell went down, when Woods went down, he gave Sam Franklin an opportunity. Sam wasn't all that great. Then he gave an opportunity to Jamie Robinson. Then he decided, Alex Cook, why don't you get out there and you go play? And fairly solid considering what you would expect off of a guy that you sign middle of the season off the practice squad in New York, another bad team, and he comes in here and takes over as like the 4th option there at safety. Alex Cook come back, and I feel like the staff likes him, so we'll see what role he's able to play this upcoming season. How many safeties will the Panthers keep this year? They kept 5 last year. Will they keep 5 once again? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. How many safeties will the Panthers keep in 2024? At least when the 53-man roster projection, or I guess cut down rather, is made later on in August. Last year, looking at it, they kept 5 safeties, and I wrote it down this time. Vonn Bell, Xavier Woods, Jeremy Chinn, Sam Franklin, Jamie Robinson. Vonn Bell, of course, no longer here. Jeremy Chinn, no longer here. Jamie Robinson is still here. Sam Franklin Jr. is still here. And so is Xavier Woods. Breaking down into tiers as I have done throughout these roster breakdowns: guaranteed roster spot, roster bubble, practice squad, or ain't gonna be here. And understand, if you're on a roster bubble, you're also a player that could end up on the practice squad, barring that you clear waivers and that the player would like to still be here in Carolina and that they would like this player to still be in Carolina. Guaranteed roster spot: Xavier Woods, clearly. Third-year starter for Carolina, entering the final year of his deal, was really good, underrated last year at that starting safety spot. He's back. You kept him. You did not keep Vonn Bell, who wasn't much of a scheme fit. He hadn't played in the scheme before, but is a widely respected safety in the league. He went back to Cincinnati, surprisingly so. Really not that surprising once he was available as a free agent. Jordan Fuller, he's coming over, been a starter throughout his career in LA, knows the scheme, was right there, middle of the road, top half of the NFL in safeties last year. He's going to be a starter, and I'm expecting that he's going to be a little bit better than he was last season. I think it'll be a pretty solid pairing there on the back end for the Panthers this upcoming season. Then Sam Franklin Jr., going to be one of these special teams leaders once again. He continues to come back here because of his special teams prowess. That's what's going to keep him in the league for potentially, this is going to be year 5 for him, man. That kid could play, he could play a decade in the NFL. And you get to a decade, that's retirement right there. That's lifetime health insurance. That's what you need to hit. It's possible. I'm not going to say he's a Matthew Slater, but you see the value of being a special teams kind of player like that, and you can stick around this league for a long time doing that and knowing how the kickoff rules have changed. We're going to talk about that on Monday, how that's getting back Carolina. Makes him even more important as a guy who's always been a sure tackler on special teams. So Xavier Woods, Jordan Fuller, Sam Franklin Jr., those 3 are guaranteed to make the roster. Roster bubble, Nick Scott. I say this primarily because he would be a vested veteran, which would mean that if he's on the roster come week 1, his contract is fully guaranteed. So they could cut him and bring him back. I don't know if there's going to be a lot of teams out there chomping at the bit to sign the worst starting safety in the NFL from last season. But that's something to look at. They may cut him, then bring him back after week 1 to still be a backup veteran safety. So he is someone I could see being cut for that, but could also still be on the roster. Alex Cook, they liked him a lot last year. He got an opportunity when they wanted to see more from that position when Bell and when Woods are out. Sam Franklin wasn't all that great there. Jamie Robinson as well. Alex Cook played 61, 62 snaps in those games against Indianapolis and Tampa, respectively, and he played a lot of special teams last season. So I'm thinking he's going to be a guy who is, I'm not going to say solid in the roster, obviously, because he's on the roster bubble, but I feel pretty good about his chances to make it again out of camp. Jamie Robinson, 5th-round draft pick last year, and Josh Smith-Wade's here, who basically does the same thing that you do, and it's not like you made that big of an impact last year. You played some special teams. You didn't play a lot on defense, and I know the expectation would be for you to play a lot on defense this year, at least right now. We'll have to wait and see what happens during training camp and the preseason. I just don't get that feeling based off of some of the moves that they made in the draft and in free agency that they're expecting a lot out of Jamie Robinson. Different head coaching staff, different GM who was here. So it could be a different thought as far as all that's going to go. So those are 3 guys I see. If I was going to guess the 5, I would have like Woods, Fuller, Franklin Jr., Cook, Robinson, cut Scott, bring him back, and then maybe throw one of those guys onto the practice squad instead. Nick Scott could be a practice squad guy. That might make more sense because if he's not going to play special teams, which I don't think he's really going to play, you would get Cook and Robinson to do that. You would have Nick Scott on special teams, on the practice squad. And then if you need him to, you can always elevate him on game day. You can do that a couple times if we have to sign him to the active roster. I think that would probably be the most likely scenario. Just my thoughts, because the best veteran situation there with him. And then the other 2 guys here, practice squad ain't going to be here, Clayton Isbell and Damani Richardson. Damani Richardson is a UDFA out of Texas A&M. Clayton Isbell, didn't write down where he's from. But he'll get an opportunity late in those preseason games to show out and possibly make the team. But I'm thinking he's either going to be in a practice squad or won't be around once September rolls around. So there is the safety group here in Carolina, which we don't talk a lot about, but maybe we'll talk more about them moving forward here in 2024. But it's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe, follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me on Twitter at Julian Council, where on the 26th, 2 Fridays from now, I'll be answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me. Get those questions into me once training camp starts on the 24th. So get those that week, and I'll answer all the questions that you have. And I will answer one question someone asked me a couple of weeks ago about the kickoff rule and how that's going to impact the Panthers on Monday as we conclude our breakdown of all the position groups by talking about special teams here on the show. So that's coming up on Monday. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding, and I'll talk to y'all on, Monday.